Hi, my name is Kennedy Green. I'm interviewing my mom.
Erika Renee Green.
Okay. So, when and where were you born?
I was born in 1970 in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania. My parents, your grandfather was in the military, so they were stationed in Maryland, but the closest hospital was in Pennsylvania. So we didn't actually live in Pennsylvania. We were in Maryland, but I was born in
How did you and your family get to Texas?
Pennsylvania. Okay, well, when your grandfather retired out the military, he decided that we weren't going to go back to Louisiana. So after I graduated from high school here in Texas, we just were legal residents of Texas. So pretty much the military brought us here.
Okay. What do you remember about your childhood?
I remember moving kind of often, maybe about every 6 years. We lived in Germany. We lived in Pennsylvania or in Maryland. We lived in Louisiana and Texas. So I remember traveling a lot. My most memorable childhood was actually in Frankfurt, Germany.
Um,
We left there when I was 13.
did your parents discuss race or racism with you?
It was always a topic of discussion in our family. Um, More so from your grandmother, my mom, who grew up in the deep south, New Orleans, Louisiana. So she often had little stories to tell us about how it was when she was growing up. So, if not so much just to compare how it was from her childhood to where we were, but she always wanted us to be aware that racism existed. Um, I remember back in the 70s when Roots first came out on television. It was a whole miniseries. It lasted for almost a week every day, or almost I think maybe once a week. I don't know, but I know it was a miniseries. And I remember getting on a bus to go to school and not really having. I had to be about 7 years old when it came out. Not really having a full on discussion about how we got to America as a people. It wasn't like my parents set us down and said, "Hey, we were once slaves." That didn't happen. I actually don't think it happened in a lot of black family, a lot of the homes back then. But it was my experience, and then as an adult, having the same discussion with friends and colleagues, other black friends of mine. We all had the same perception of race in this country. We didn't recognize the slavery aspect of how we got here. It wasn't until that movie came out, and then that's when all the black parents were like, we need to. It came out in '77, so you look at there was more idealism and more nationalism, black nationalism, coming out of the '60s. So by the time you got to the '70s, you had people that were my parents' age in the '70s. They were still coming out of that um, black movement type mentality, but at the same time, you had disco was coming out, so people were a little bit more free, had more freedom. You had the music and the things that changed. You had women's liberation and all that coming out of the '60s and going into the '70s. I don't think our parents were as devoted to raising us up with that same type of subculture that happened in the '70s. So as a result, we really didn't know. So going back to how it was getting on a bus after watching Roots for the first time and have to sit next to the little white kids that we were in school with, who we called our friends, I consciously stopped talking to my little white friends. I even remembered I had a white friend named Holly, and I got on the school bus the next day and I told her, I can't talk to you no more. And she said, why? And I said, because your people treated my people badly. And I literally remember telling her, I'll never forget that girl's name. Her name was Holly. And she gave me the most crazy look like, oh my God, like, why? But that's how it affected me. At that point, that's when the black parents were thinking, okay, you know what, we do need to sit down and talk to them. But I think it was a different type of mentality. It wasn't intentional, but I just don't think we got enough of what our culture meant and what we were as a black people growing up in the 70s. We didn't get it. Our parents were, I mean, that was the days when they had a lot of parties. Every weekend there was a party at somebody's house. So I just don't think they consciously knew how it would affect us. And then all of a sudden, Alex Haley comes out with a bestseller, and then they made a TV miniseries out of it. And then that's when we were a little bit more conscious. So, yeah, that's my take on that whole thing.
So, why did you choose to go to Dillard University?
Okay, so HBCU education is deeply rooted in our family. Your grandmother went to Southern University in New Orleans. Your Aunt Rita graduated from Xavier. You have cousins that went into medical school. 2 of them went to Meharry Medical College. So when it comes to education, and you had a couple of graduates from Dillard too in the family, it was almost already established, just like it was already established that you were going to attend a HBCU. That's just how it is. That's just where you were going to go. It wasn't that much of a choice, and it was more of it's a tradition in the family, really. You may have others that go off to state schools, but the matriarchs and the patriarchs in the family still value a HBCU education. So in order to make people happy, you pretty much already know you're going to go to a HBCU.
So what did you study there at Dillard?
Nursing. And a lot of people don't know this, but Dillard University was the first baccalaureate program in the Deep South, the first accredited. A lot of people didn't know that.
So, who would you identify as most important, like, teacher or role model that you encountered there?
I had my African American literature teacher. I think was the one that she was the more like the eye opener. She's the one that kind of helped remove the little scales off your eyes when it came to valuing the importance and contribution of African American literature. So I remember her class more fondly than anything. Dr. Smothers. Yeah, I enjoyed that class. I actually finished the textbook, all the different stories. So, I mean, we grew up knowing who Mary McLeod Bethune was, who Ernest Gaines was, but the course was more of an eye-opener for me.
So, how did it prepare you for where you are now?
HBCU education?
Yeah.
So, I can actually, when I finished from high school, we're in Central Texas. Houston, Tillotson, and Austin was the only HBCU that was close to where we were. And because I pretty much wanted to be out on my own, I wanted to have that first semester living in a dorm, and I was a journalism major at the time, I chose Texas State. Against my parents' wishes, I chose that university first. So when it comes to a HBCU education versus a state school, I'm coming from both those areas. So I have experience in both those type of education institutions. So when I decided to go to Dillard, just like I said before, even with that instructor and all the other courses I took, it felt good to be on campus and look at people that looked like me, that talked like me, that dressed like me, that walked like me. So that was important. And when it comes to whether you're a freshman or whether you're an adult learner, going back to school for your graduate, which I did, I chose to go back to Prairie View for my graduate degree. When you choose that type of atmosphere, the things that will, there's different things that will hinder your growth and hinder your development as a student. Why would you want to have more issues compounded with not feeling like you're accepted? It's much more better to go to a university that's diverse because you don't have to deal with all the other extraneous things that you got to deal with when you go into the other university. You understand what I'm saying? So it just makes sense.
So, what memories stick out the most when you attended Dillard or PV?
Just the ability to laugh the way I normally laugh. I can be a little bit more louder, and nobody looked at me like I was from somewhere they ain't never heard of before, or looking at me like I'm an outsider. You can be yourself. You know, you can dress the way you want. You can eat what you want. If you want to walk around campus with a plate of red beans and rice at Dillard campus, it was fine. You can do that. So that's what I enjoy the most. It's just being able to be relaxed, and you felt like you're around family.
Okay. Well, that's the end of the interview.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Well, I'm Kennedy Green, and this is my mother, Erika Green.